So, welcome everybody. We have lovely Jenny Anderson with us this evening. And Jenny is a coach and owns a company with her partner Dave called Freedom Thinking. And Jenny's here to talk to us tonight about a little bit about her story, her eating disorders and stuff like that, and how she has healed from that using the three principles, which is the I don't know, the topic, the subject, the thing which has helped me change my life too. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. I know everyone was really excited about it, and so maybe you could start a little bit by telling everybody here a little bit about your backstory, because I know how I met you, and it was purely through coincidence or divine intervention, because you're from Colchester, Essex, or near Colchester, which is where I'm from too. So, say hello and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I came across an understanding when I was 23 years old that almost sideswiped me. I was not expecting really to recover from my eating disorder. I wasn't really expecting to become confident or find peace of mind. I'd spent about 10 years struggling with eating disorders, so between anorexia and bulimia. As a teenager, really struggling with my feeling states, and then using alcohol and drugs as a way to feel different, and then using food. And I think my parents, bless them, like threw everything at it. So I had different types of therapy, saw nutritionists, had herbal remedies, hypnosis, kinesiology, reflexology. They just kind of threw everything at it, like there's something wrong, there's something that needs to be fixed. We want to help you. So they were very holistic. But it was when I went on a training at the age of 23. There was a community psychologist in London, and he started to talk about the nature of the human mind and the misunderstanding that we live in that creates all suffering and all problems. And it's interesting because I'd spent 10 years really thinking about my eating disorder, talking about my eating disorder, worrying about my anxiety, talking about my depression. And I could tell within the first day of a 3-day training that this was different, because there was no focus on problems or issues. It wasn't like going around the room and everyone sharing what their issue was or anything. And I guess there was part of me thinking, well, when are we going to get to the nitty gritty? When are we going to get to the real problems? When are we going to kind of get to the point? But then by the end of day 3, I'd just fallen into a space of calm and a place of peace. And it was something that I wasn't really that used to anymore. It was a familiar feeling in that I had felt it before, but it felt like it hadn't really been there for a long time. And I couldn't have told you then what I'd heard. I couldn't have really told you what the 3 principles were. I remembered a couple of them, and I couldn't remember the third one. But the internal shift that happened for me was life-changing, and has kind of taken me on a completely different path. So the other day, I was doing a webinar that Charli was on, and the guy said, could you sum up maybe what it was like looking back? Can you sum up what was so helpful? And I know that what I found helpful was beyond the words. But if I had to find words to share it with a group, I would say that I started to get a sense and a feel for the thought-feeling connection, that the experience we live in is 100% of the time coming from thought, and that my feelings of broken came from thought. My feelings of joy came from thought, and that there wasn't a link in the way that I thought between my past and things that happened to me and how I felt now. There wasn't a link between my personality, who I thought I was, and the feeling state that I lived in. Because I started to see that those things, those identities were a creation. And I'd been studying my own creations for 10 years with different therapists, trying to find, you know, where was the point? Where was the thing that happened in your life that messed you up so much and made you like this?
Yeah.
No one really had ever pointed me to the type of thinking that I lived in on a daily basis. So like, firstly, I'd say that was something that really got my attention. And I remember just thinking, wow, like, I thought I was a shy person. I thought that being in big crowds of people created a feeling in me. So it was almost like that was the first chink in my armor of starting to question what I thought I knew.
Yeah.
And then the other piece that I feel like is so valuable is Roger spoke about the principle of mind. And the principle of mind, in the way that he described it, was that this power that we are connected to in every single moment that creates, and it's an intelligent and it's infinite and it's knowledgeable. And I went from feeling very kind of isolated and separate and not good enough to almost feeling like I'm part of the power of the universe. There's this power that courses through us, and it's not mine and it's not yours. It's something that's uniting. It's all.
Yeah.
It's total. And like, again, these are words trying to describe, but I can see that those were the insights that really started to unlock that well-being or that peace that resides in all of us. And I think I'd spent so many years studying my illness, I'd never thought to look at what is actually, you know, what is actually happening. What is illness? What is this suffering that you're living in? And I started to see that my depression, my anxiety, my eating disorders were symptoms of a misunderstanding. And that if I could start to learn more about the truth of something and clear up that misunderstanding, then those symptoms will start to fall away. And I think it's almost like I'd been trying to rearrange my thinking around food. I'd been trying to rearrange my thinking about myself. I'd focused so much on content. I'd never been told to look to this power that we have within us to create reality. And I'd never really had that sense that it was 100% like the reality we live in is coming from within us in every single moment. No exceptions. We are not victims of the past. We're not victims of circumstance. We're victims of our own mind and our own misunderstanding. And that's not to belittle the suffering that people experience, because that is our entire reality.
Yeah.
And I know that when I'm in darkness, it's dark. It doesn't feel comfortable. It's not nice. But I feel like there is something that opened in me over those 3 days that has grown and grown and grown and grown. And that's that knowledge that I'm all right. And so is everybody else. And my entire kind of work and life now has been around pointing people back in that direction. Because I feel like I got introduced to, I think I said it to you before, Charlie, like my best teacher, my best guide, and it was within me. And I'd spent so long looking out, waiting for someone to fix me, that I'd missed how much intelligence was built into me. That you know, beats my heart, grows your nails, all the things that it does, regulates blood pressure and your hormones and all those incredible things. That intelligence, I didn't realize that intelligence was there for the mind, and that feelings were allowed and okay. You know, we go to war with a feeling. We go to war with it. We try and change it. We come up with our best attempts, whether that be food, whether it be alcohol, whether it be shopping, whatever. But I think this understanding allows people to get comfortable with their feelings and not fear them in the same way. And it's not rejecting any kind of feeling. It's not kind of grasping for certain type of feelings. It's recognizing that all feelings come from the same place, and that with less fear around them, they do what they naturally do anyway, which is pass through us. I think we've kind of all got so good at, you know, jumping on the negative feelings or the negative thoughts and trying to change them. And it's become almost like a lifetime thing. And we don't realise all of our attention is on that. So then we get more information about that. And it seems almost counterintuitive to look away and look to something else, something true, something constant. Because we want to talk about the issue, we want to talk about the problem. But I know that after that 3 days, my eating habits changed dramatically. I never went back to my bulimia or starving. I kind of feel I got quite caught up in the nutrition and healthy eating, and was a little bit obsessive about that in some ways. And I've loved that I've then seen that can become another prison, and kind of let that go. And what has been the emergent is this natural capacity to nourish myself in a very easy way, and it not feel like efforting or trying or fixing. It's like there's an intelligence that knows what I need, and I don't listen to everyone else all the time and think, oh, if it's good for them, it must be good for me. It's like I'm starting to get in touch with my knowledge, that knows, that thing that we've forgotten, that you can see sometimes when when they've talked about tribes, the fact that they know what to have when they've got a tummy upset, they know what herbs to use, like they're just in tune.
Yeah.
So like the principles brings us back into balance, back into tune. It brings the connection between thought and feeling back together. It brings us back together with our own natural capacity for wisdom and common sense. And it also allows us to navigate life in ways that help us thrive. So it feels like, I feel like it was the biggest gift I ever could have been given. And I always say, like, I was so lucky to fall upon it. I had no idea what I was walking into. And if someone had said to me before, you're going to go to this training and you're not going to walk out feeling like the same person anymore, I wouldn't have believed it to be true. I'm not sure I would have wanted it, because there are certain things I maybe wanted to hold on to, but the freedom that has come from continually kind of getting curious about that silence that we have within us, and less interested in the stories that we tell ourselves. And we were recently on a walk with a friend who had tried to take his own life. He'd been struggling with addiction for about 12 years. And my partner Dave said to him, probably in about 20 minutes, half an hour, you're going to think, what the hell has this got to do with my addiction? He said, but please bear with me, because it will seem like we're not talking to the problem, but there is something that creates problems, and there's something that dissolves them, and it's the same source, but we don't understand it. So it feels like understanding is what will change people, not techniques and kind of working hard at it. It's amazing that there's a knowledge that once we start to get a sense of, the healing and the change happens from within us.
Yeah, there's so much in what you said there. That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. So for those ladies who are listening who don't know what the 3 principles are, or have never heard me talk about it, how would you, I know they're words, but how would you describe what they are for you, and how they play out for you in your life?
So I think when I first started learning, that it was these 3 words, and they were quite separate. So I'll explain them to you in the way that they're explained to me to begin with. So I spoke a bit about the principle of mind, that there's this intelligence that we are all part of, that knows how to live, that is knowledgeable, that is total. It's what mysticism has maybe pointed to as oneness. It's what religion maybe calls God. And I feel like the man that first had the insight around this, he said, like, the words found him, and they were quite neutral words in a way. You could speak to anyone of any faith or no faith. You could speak to a scientist, and he'd talk about mind as this energy, this formless energy that creates. And the second principle that he spoke to was this power of consciousness. So not kind of my consciousness and your consciousness, but this power of consciousness, this awareness that we're all part of. And then the principle of thought. And like, thought is the one that people normally think I kind of get that. But when we're kind of speaking about the principle of thought, we're not talking about thoughts that run through your head, not talking about what you think or how you think, or telling you what to think or how to think. We're saying that there is this power called thought that allows us to create a reality, and that those three principles work together. And in the way that I see them now is that they are a metaphor pointing to this one source of experience, pointing us back within ourselves, but knowing that this identity, this creation, is coming from the one source, and that which creates me is that which creates you.
Mm.
And that this idea of separation and this idea of identity is a creation of thought. And I used to try and transcend being human. I didn't want the human experience. I didn't want separation. I wanted oneness. But I think this has allowed me to really have a lot of appreciation and thanks for the experience of being a human being, and that I get to create a life and have friendships and relationships. Before knowing the principles, I created so much suffering, and I bought into it, and I thought about my thinking, and I lived in a world very much as a victim, and I blamed other people. And so it's almost like you can see that it's the same power creating my experience. I just didn't understand it. So I can't, it makes sense. We open our eyes, we look out. It's out there doing this to me. You made me feel like that. Whereas this is kind of saying, it's not that there are people in our lives that maybe don't do things that aren't very kind, but it's like the way that we experience it. Where does the power lie in terms of our experience? So I feel like they're a metaphor pointing us back inside, allowing us to see how moment to moment experience is created. But I also feel they kind of open you up to the fact we don't know. There is so much I don't understand and I don't know. I thought I knew more about the principles, when I first came across them, because I could define them and I'd split them into the three and really speak about them as things, not really having the respect for the fact that they are these formless power that is bringing to life all. And I can't get my head around that. Like, it looks like I'm looking at a laptop, lots of different people, and we all seem very separate, but to know that there is a common thread within all of us that connects us, unites us, it allows you to see through difference, embrace diversity in ways that I used to find quite hard, because I thought that the way that I saw the world was right. Then would make everyone else wrong if they didn't agree with me. And you start to see that the reality we create looks true and real to us, and the reality that other people create looks true and real to them. That is the nature of these principles. They bring to life experience as if it's true. And I think I've really started to get suspicious of my own creations, because I remember just thinking back in my life of, if there was moments when I wasn't feeling shy, then where was my shyness? If it was a part of me. Looking back at the times where I had been enjoying company with other people and having a laugh, where was all of my anxiety then? Where does it exist? And starting to see that there had been moments in that 10 years that I spoke of as being this most awful 10 years, where I'd experienced peace, joy, sadness, love, like all of the emotions. But I got so fixated on certain ones that I spoke about a lot and went to therapy about.
Yeah.
And it was almost like the principles, it did feel counterintuitive to begin with, because it's like shifting your attention away from what's been created and starting to look what's creating. And it's like it's self-proving, in that you can ask any question, but you come back to, but how do you experience it? How do you experience life now? And there will always be mind, thought, and consciousness there creating. The past can't give us a feeling now. The future can't give us a feeling now. It's going to be this moment.
Yeah.
Mysticism, popular kind of psychology stuff recently in the last sort of 15 years, it's been about be in the now, be present. And I remember hearing that before, like, that sounds fantastic, but how do you do that? How do you And it seems like it's in the absence of all of the noise, you find yourself present. And I think that's the gift of understanding, that it takes you from a world of confusion and constantly looking for sources of your feeling, constantly looking for things to alleviate feelings, to recognizing what a feeling is made from. And then you see it doesn't really have any form. It's
So I'm just gonna I think that some people might be confused just by that bit. So the bit about that was brilliant what you said, and I'm suspecting that a lot of people may be on this webinar who may be in pain, who may be feeling a struggle with their eating or habit or whatever it is, and thinking, what do you mean it's not in form? Like, what is creating it? And I know you've talked about thought, but if someone's sitting there thinking, I'm in pain, what would you say to them about this understanding and how that experience for them is being created?
It's a funny thing because we separate out our feelings as good and bad and right and wrong.
Mm.
And we want to move away from pain. And I think it's in understanding that when we're sat in discomfort, we can start to notice for ourselves, what are we sat in? What are we thinking about?
Yeah.
What is it? And you see that so much of our time is preoccupied thinking about imagined futures. How are we going to cope? How am I going to do it? How am I going to change my eating? How am I going to either lose weight, put on weight? Like we're living in an imagined future, which causes a lot of suffering for us now. Or we spend a huge amount of time thinking about the past, like what we've done wrong, how much hurt we maybe have caused our families with the problems we've had and that we're facing. And the reason I say that it's formless is because you can start to see from your own mind that it naturally goes in and out of different experiences. Even when we're in a huge amount of suffering, we can often, you know, we've gone to see a friend and they've got a new baby, and you're just like caught up in how gorgeous this baby is, and you're just in that moment with the baby, and then you leave and you're like, oh, what was I worrying about? What was my problems again? And it's like, I think it's the most innocent thing that we do, is that we focus on ourselves. Focus on ourselves and how we're doing and how we're feeling and what that means about us.
Yeah.
And I'd spent 10 years doing that, and I wasn't getting better. It felt like in some ways the kindest thing would be to focus on it all and to talk about it and to see therapists and to analyze it and look for it, because it felt like it deserved attention. It felt like it was me. And there was something about this understanding that I saw that what I think is not who I am. Who is this person that gets to observe all of those creations? Who was there at 5? Who was there at 10? Watching those things, liking different things. Like, you can see how thought, if it was solid and true, then we'd still have, you know, the same best friend we had when we were 5. We'd like the same toy, we'd like the same food, we'd like the same music, but we change our minds. So all of those things are what change. But there's something within us that knows that change. And it seems, it's like it's difficult because we're talking about something that doesn't have form. So
Yeah.
People may call that spiritual. People may call it our soul. They may call it our essence. But it's something that we have to get a feel for. And we don't have to believe in anything religious. We don't have to believe in anything spiritual. But you get a sense that we are not static, in that we have different experience. We're not stuck with one forever. We go in and out of things. So what is it, the stuff that brings us our experience? Well, that's thought in the moment, creating a feeling. And that's how we live. We live through our feelings. But I think, like, I know that if someone had said to me, well, there's all this suffering you're living in, this 10 years that you have lived in so much darkness and so much sadness, that's thought created, I'd be like, oh, piss off. It's real. And so I remember hearing that low self-esteem didn't exist, and I was like, well, it does, because I've got it. And there's this song that we heard recently, and it was like, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And I thought it was such a good start to a song, because I was quite attached to my story.
Yeah.
And it was done in innocence, because I thought that story meant something. And I wanted to fix it and make it look nicer, and I wanted to be a good person. And I didn't know that focusing on the story and focusing on this sense of who I thought I was, what was the thing that was creating the suffering. Like, I didn't once look up and see where I was. I always remembered the drive home after that 3 days, road I'd driven on a million times, but just noticing stuff. And then it happened to be that night there was sundogs, so rainbows in the clouds in the sky, and just being like totally like, wow, that is stunning. And then getting home and driving into this tiny village where my parents have lived, and I've lived since I was 3 years old, and noticing like the thatch roofs and some of the flowers, and just noticing this village that I'd lived in. And I was like, where have I been? Because I haven't been here. And I was thinking back to this incredible opportunity I had at 19 to go away traveling for a year. I'd saved up, I'd worked in crappy jobs. And I remember arriving in South Africa and being like, this isn't what was supposed to happen. I was supposed to get here and be a cool, confident traveller person. And I arrived in South Africa and I was still me. And I was so pissed off. But it's like I was in the most beautiful, incredible places with the incredible opportunities. I learned to dive. I got to swim with dolphins and went kayaking. But I didn't experience a huge amount of joy or peace or happiness that year. Everything should have been in the world of form for me to feel happy.
Mm.
But I still struggled my own mind. And I think starting to see that external circumstances can't create a feeling in us. Because we can have all the things in place, we can have the money, the wealth, the holiday, whatever it is, the partner, and still feel dissatisfied and not good enough. And it's knowing that there isn't that connection between an outside and inside.
Mm.
There isn't this connection between my perfect body weight and what I look like in a feeling state. Because I know for myself that I'd get to that point that I'd set myself, and then I'd set another one. That wouldn't be good enough. But
Yeah.
it was never about the weight. It was never about the food. It was this search, this strive for this feeling, wanting to feel peaceful, wanting to feel okay, wanting to feel good enough. And it's not to in any way disrespect the feeling, the experience of suffering, because it's shit. I don't wish it upon anyone, but I also know that you can learn and grow from it. That there's a wake up call in there for you. That feeling is telling you about your mind. We think it's information about the world. It's actually telling us about our own mind. And when we start to get a respect for that, we're connected to this infinite potential for thought. And you only have to look at the world of what's been created, like in the last 100 years, where we've gone as a species in terms of what we've created in technology, in travel, all of those things. That didn't exist, and then suddenly it existed. How did it come into existence? Well, it came from thought, someone's original thought or insight. And I think we look at other people and think they've got insight or they've got access to knowledge and intelligence, and we don't. But you start to see we're all intelligent.
Mm.
We all have access to new thought that could be helpful for us. But we almost, one of the things that the gentleman who came to talk about the principles was a man named Sydney Banks. And he was a uneducated Scottish welder living in Canada. And he said he was the least deserving of the insight that he had. But he had this incredible insight where he saw past his own ego. So he experienced death of the ego and then got to kind of come back. And he started sharing with people on the island, and they started to get healthy. People heard about him, and he has no idea how. So we had psychologists and gurus and people from over the world flocking to him because he'd seen something that he was sharing with people that was allowing them to have nicer lives, easier lives, more graceful, gentle lives. And then he got to speak in universities. He got to go into the military. He's written books. And it's like he wasn't learned. He wouldn't have called himself an intellectual. He had to ask his wife how to spell psychology. But he had this insight that shifted him from a man of suffering and anxiety to one of peace and beauty. And it's not to say that he then transcended the human experience, because he was a man who went in and out of different feeling states. But when someone asked him once, what do you do when you feel insecure? He didn't really understand the question. And he actually took a psychologist to explain it to him. He was like, when you're in that feeling of insecurity, what do you do? And you could see the logic to him was like, well, I feel insecure. Like, but we're always wanting to get rid of certain feelings.
Yeah.
I think his story and the fact that I refer to him isn't that I put him up on some pedestal or thought he had something I didn't, but it's the respect that I have for an ordinary man having this extraordinary experience, and then what he saw that he shared with the world tirelessly for the rest of his life is changing psychology and psychiatry. So I've got such a deep respect for that. But it's the respect of an ordinary man. And I think we look to professionals, we look to people that we think know more than us, and we forget what we actually have inside us. And suffering feels like it's our everything when we're in it. But just to acknowledge that sometimes we're not in it. And I never ever looked at that. I never looked at the times when I was all right. I just focused on the shitty times and the struggles. I never noticed that actually something changed and my experience changed by itself. I could go to bed in a foul mood, wake up in a good mood, go to bed in a good mood, wake up in a foul mood. Like, what is this thought stuff? I could sometimes go for a run and I'd feel better and energized, and sometimes I go for a run and at the end of the run I'm still mulling over whatever it was. So I know it's not the run that changes. Our experience doesn't change from doing, it changes through a new thought, and we are all connected to an infinite source of new thought, but we just get lost and caught in our own stories and the old, and we study them.
Yes, I think what you said was quite interesting, and it's a lot to what I point to, is that once you get that thought of our story, our suffering, our grief, our pain, once we keep focusing our attention on that, of course we'll get more of the same. But it's looking to our wellness, looking to our mental health, looking beyond that. And that's what you're saying, isn't it? It's just the rest of that stuff, it will pass if we don't hang on to it for dear life. We don't know any different. That's all innocent. But there is a sense of clinging and attachment, and there's something wrong with me because we don't believe we're good enough. And I think that's such an important message to give people.
I remember it was only the other night we were doing a community group, and we had this young guy who's kind of overcome his 12-year cocaine addiction speaking. And as he was speaking about when he calmed down, he realised one of his insights, that he calmed down when he had the drugs in his hand. He hadn't even taken them, and that craving disappeared, that urgency went. And I just remembered with my eating habits, it's like, when did I calm down? And it was normally when everyone had left the house. I knew I had it to myself, and I'd just be like, I can do what I want now, and I'd do whatever I did. But the feeling of peace actually came before I did that behaviour. And it was only really the other day that I noticed that subtle thing. And it's like, if it was ever the behaviour that changed my feeling state, how could it have happened even before I did the behaviour? It was when I knew I could do the behaviour. And it feels like, it's almost, when we're working with kids in schools, we always say to them, become like a investigator, like come like a scientist, start to look. And I think when you start to look, you start to see it for yourself. It's self-evident that there can't be an experience without this thing called thought, and this thing called thought is changing, and that it's brought us all kinds of experiences, but we didn't know to not focus on the negative ones all the time. We didn't know that we didn't have to. It was almost like permission to, you don't actually have to talk about your story anymore. But I think even kind of bigger than that, it was like the knowledge that I am not my story, and nor is anyone else, like broke through all the crap. So I can still get into like negative ways of thinking, but it's almost like you do not buy into it in the same way. It doesn't have the same power. There is something so settling about knowing that there is like this closed loop in terms of how we feel, and the less attention we give it, kind of the quicker it passes through. But to know that we're part of something so much grander. I think I used that word the other night, Charlie, like it just came to me, like it's so much grander than I realised. But I didn't see beauty, I wasn't grateful for life. You know, it was a struggle. Every day felt like it was a struggle to get through. And it's interesting because I felt so inspired by that shift. I knew I wanted to share this with people. I've had the opportunity to travel all over the world, teaching, sharing, and then filming other people sharing this and transformations. So I've got to see people who have been in addiction, who have been labelled with all kinds of mental illness, heavy labels. People have been institutionalised, hospitalised. That as they start to learn this, it's almost like it's the same teaching going in across the board, like wherever people are at, wherever there's human beings, you can share this. Life starts to become easier. So whether that's someone who's had heavy labels their whole life and been institutionalized, starting to just have a bit more ease and understanding and a communication and connection with other human beings, they start to settle. Like in business, people speak about being more productive and getting on with colleagues better. Like relationships start to change because there's the understanding, and then there is then implications of understanding. And one of those that was really powerful for me is to start to see these separate realities. So hang on a minute. No one can see the world that I see. It will look different to them given their own thinking. And that was huge. It's huge because suddenly, you know, I could look at my family and get why we would disagree on things and fall out because we're all trying to argue our own reality. And I didn't even listen to them anymore because I was right and they were wrong. I remember just going home and being like, wow, this is a different place to listen from. I wasn't listening for people to agree with me, and I wasn't listening for them to corroborate my story. I was like listening to like, what is this person trying to say to me? How do they see the world? And like trying to get more of a sense of that. I got really curious in other people's realities.
Yeah.
And you can see how when we're constantly focused on ourselves, we struggle. But I didn't know that I'd learn about something and my attention would be shifted, and I'd start to just notice other people live in completely different realities to me. And it makes sense to them in the same way mine has made sense to me. And that for relationships. And it's interesting because with, you know, the topic is the 3 principles in eating disorders. And I have referenced it, but it will seem almost like, well, when are you going to talk about eating disorders? When are you going to talk about food habits? And it can sometimes, I know people can get frustrated sometimes, and people have always said to you, what's your elevator speech? I'm like, we do not have one. It's a longer conversation than that. But I also know that people can hear something that can change them in a moment.
Yeah.
But I know, like I know that people focusing on what they think their problem is will see more of that problem. And I've seen again and again and again when people start to get interested and inquire about the nature of this mind, the nature of this reality, they start to get insights about the nature of reality, the nature of our mind. And that moves us in a healthier direction. It's a very simple shift. But I know that when I'm in a bad mood, there's nothing I can do about it. So it's not like, oh, you learn this and then you apply it. It's like, when I'm in a bad mood, I'm in a bad mood, but I have understanding. Before doing the webinar, I was a bit like, oh, I'm a bit nervous. I'm not quite sure what the structure is, and it's a new group. Before, that to me would have meant don't do it. So I don't like that feeling, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have to cancel. Whereas now I know that my feeling comes from within me, given how I think about something. It doesn't come from this group. So you can see that it's like sometimes it will feel like a completely new idea to people. Sometimes it will feel like, oh, I've kind of heard this before. Or this is a bit like CBT. This is a bit like mindfulness. This is a bit like Buddhism. But what I'd say is that we cannot not do this, but we listen through what we already know.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to think it sounds like something, but to know that all of those things have been created from, like all of those things have come from this principles of mind, thought and consciousness. They're all theories, they're all ideas, they come from someone's mind. But this is something that's common. And I'm just aware of the time, and I'd love to have people ask questions.
Yes. Sorry, I was a bit like, oh, keep talking. Right, would anyone, so I said some of you may have missed the beginning bit. If you'd like to ask a question and you're happy to be on video, give me a wave and ask a question. And if you don't want to do that and you want to type it into the chat box, just type it into the chat box if anyone's got. So we're happy for any, but I think we'd love it if you spoke. But Simone, right, I'm going to bring you on. This is lovely, Simone. Hello, Simone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Sorry, I've never done this before, so I'm a bit out of my depth. But I missed the beginning, and I haven't ever heard of the 3 principles. But something that I did pick up on was this letting go of your story. And I'm not saying I'm right, I'm not saying I'm wrong, but with that conversation, it's definitely, so I kind of allowed myself to be abused from a teenager. I was very promiscuous and just allowed a lot of things to happen to me. I then was in an abusive relationship. Now that's all in the past somewhat, but I kind of feel pride. Okay, you need to go to bed now, please. I'm just talking. Sorry, we've got one out of bed. Right, listen. You need to go. No, you need to go. Please, I'm sorry about this. Just a moment. You need to go out.
I'll just put her on mute for a minute. She's got 5 children.
Yeah. So now, because my story definitely has an impact on my mental health now, but I also have some pride about how far I've come from my story. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I would find it hard to let go of my story because I have some pride of how I've overcome it, even though really I haven't overcome it because it's still having an impact from me. Did I get that wrong about letting your story go?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we can get so lost in words, and we have this thing called memory, and that's an incredible gift. But often we bring to mind things that aren't so pleasant, and we relive them again and again and again. There isn't anything in the 3 principles that would tell people to let go of the story or to think like this or to think like that, but to recognize that that's what you're up against. Like, the story feels like it has some form, it feels like it has some substance, and I think to be able to recognize that it's a creation of thought, like what happened, and it sounds like you've kind of moved through some really difficult and challenging times, and you kind of almost giving yourself some credit for that. And I think there's nothing wrong with that, and I wouldn't want to take that away from you. But like you say, like, the more that we relive something, the more we experience it now. But to know that there is a way in which you can see your past in a very different way. It's like we view it the same way over and over again, and we can't change anything that's happened, but we can have insight about it now that can allow us to live now with more peace and ease. So it's starting to see that you acted on a thought and you didn't ever question it, and that's why you did what you did, and that's why life played out as it did, and so did everyone else in that environment. Everyone else on this planet is acting from thought that doesn't look like thought. We're just kind of living, just acting. Whereas now it seems like you've gained a respect for the things you've gone through, but then you're still feeling like you're suffering them on a day-to-day basis. And to know that if anything does fall away, that's not you disrespecting or you're not having pride in what you've achieved, but it's allowing you to have a more of an ease of life now, because that's where life happens. It's now, but we kind of spend so much time looking back, and we can learn incredible lessons, and it sounds like you have. But I think when we think that's who we are, or if that story then defines us, it becomes a prison in itself. And just to know that the freedom to experience a completely different life is always available to us. One that we thrive, one where we have understanding. And it's hard because we're so used to kind of, I guess, being told, right, now go away and think like this or practice this. But it's knowing that the only thing we ever can experience is thought in this moment. So we can bring to mind something from 10 years ago and experience it now. Like, that is the power of this stuff. But we're also connected to an infinite source of new thought, new ideas, new potentials. And I think we get to experience more of that when we're not so focused on our story. So I didn't choose to drop, all these things about myself. Some of them I would have held on to for dear life because I was pretty attached to them. But it was like the understanding takes care of it. And it seems like that knows how to live us. That knows how to guide us. And it does feel like you get lived more. And I think I held on so tightly to this identity and this story that I felt frozen. And to just loosen my grips on it and to start to kind of appreciate what it was, allowed me to have a lot more kind of peace and joy in my life. And what has come from that, the job I get to do, the traveling, the people I've got to meet, and the amount of peace of mind I found. But it's almost like it's being willing to question what we think we know, and to know that we don't have to let go of anything. There's certain things I still like. Earlier on, my partner said to me, he goes, I think sometimes when you get insecure or a bit jealous, I think it's more because you're scared people are going to leave you. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I had all these stories from my past. And I think it's just, this isn't about having to be anything or dropping anything or any kind of way of being, but just to know that's what it is now.
That will be set to change. 250,000.
Sorry, so there's some people coming on who are unmuting. Simone, does that answer your question for you?
Yes, I think it's just finding out how to go about letting go of it. I can see why and how it would be beneficial for me to let go, but what is the process of that? So what happens is something will make me feel down that's completely irrelevant to my story, but then I'll go back to my story and think, oh, this is because of my story. So how can I not keep going back to it? What is the process of letting go of your story?
Well, I think you kind of almost said it in your question. It's almost like you start to feel a bit low, and then you go back to your story and you blame that past for a feeling now. And I think when you start to see that that's actually impossible, there's nothing that ever happened in our life that can create a feeling for us now. The only thing that can create feeling for us now is thought. And the more that we see that, and it can seem, my partner often describes it as like an atom. It seems like, he said, it's like this tiniest thing, but broken open, it can destroy cities. Mm-hmm. And starting to see that there is only ever one reason we feel like we feel now, and that's going to be thought. the past has no power now. It never has. And, you know, one of the most challenging communities I got to share this in was with disabled refugees in South Africa. And the first day of the training, we really listened to their stories, because you kind of think you're justified in feeling negative, you're justified in feeling victimized, you're justified in all of that kind of feeling. And then kind of after finding our feet again, I've been like, wow, okay, this is relevant, this conversation is relevant. We shared with them about the nature of their mind, and we started to put back together thought and feeling, and spoke about this power of mind, this intelligence behind life that knows how to live us and breathe us. And at the end of the second day, one of the guys said, look, if I'm honest, I was a bit pissed off yesterday because you're white, I thought you were bringing us money and stuff. He said, but I can honestly say that what you've taught us is so much more valuable than that. And their stories were one that we did want to honour and respect, because many of them had seen their families murdered, raped. Many of them had lost limbs in war zones and then come to South Africa and experienced the xenophobic attacks of 2008. But it was so nice because I don't see broken human beings in front of me. I see people that have gone through experiences that I can't imagine. But I know that they've got resilience built into them, because it is the nature of this universe. That this ability to bounce back, this ability to see new, this ability to move forward is there within everyone. But I think to know that there is no tie between the past and now. The past doesn't define us. We can learn from it, we can grow from it, we can respect it, but we can know that actually the only thing we can ever experience in this moment is thought in this moment. And it will look and feel true and real. But to know that it's made of the same stuff, like often people are a bit shocked. I'm like, the same thought of what happened is the same stuff in its nature as what should I have for tea. It's still thought. But there's certain ones that for different people will be different things. They will feel heavier and more weighty, and we've got more thinking around them, and we think they mean more. But when you start to see it more as the same stuff, without the good, bad, right, wrong, shouldn't be feeling this, shouldn't think about that, all of that stuff, it takes care of it for you. And it feels frustrating, because I'd love to be able to say to someone, just do this, this and this, and it will appear. But it's like, the understanding shifts and changes people, starting to see that there is only ever one thing happening, and that is that we're in the experience of thought and consciousness now. And we can bring to life something that happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and it feel real now. That's the power of it. So you kind of can forgive us for getting caught up in it sometimes. And I think that's the other thing that seems to come for people, is a lot of compassion and love for themselves. Like, wow, this stuff is powerful. It's all we can know, it's all we can see. But to know that it's limitless. And you only have to look at history, what we have gone through and overcome, and how resilient we all are.
Simone, I'll talk to you about this another time, because we're running out of time. But I have one question that's been written in the chat box, and Romilly has asked, if someone wants to start implementing this understanding in their daily life but doesn't have much money for courses, what would you suggest?
There's an online resource that myself and my ex-husband created called 3principlesmovies.com. And that's where we went round and filmed people in all walks of life, sharing their story. We've got different coaches and facilitators speaking, people with all different kind of stories, so addiction, eating disorders, people that have been in prison, people from homeless shelters. So there's different interviews and documentaries on there that are free to watch. Myself and Dave have a media section on the Freedom Thinking website, where we have interviews with one of the refugees, a guy called Godel, who's incredible, and when we're in the Lake District where we're based, we run a community group, which I think is £6, and you can join that via live stream. We have one tomorrow, Thursday, 7 till 9, and we try and do at least a couple a month when we're up here. And I know that you have different podcasts and things, Charli, where people can learn more.
Yeah, I've got the live videos. I think all of these are in my Facebook group, so if they do watch my videos, they'll get a hint of it. But Romilly, yes, what I'll do on the live event, I put the website, but I'll post the live stream link for tomorrow for Jenny and Dave's event tomorrow night at 7. So I'm going to close it off there because we're sort of on the hour, but just to say thank you, Jenny, for your time and for your wisdom. And thank you all for coming along this evening. I'm really pleased. This is my first ever webinar. So like Simone was like, I'm not used to this. Like, I'm not me. So I think it went all right, and I'm really pleased you all came. And it was lovely to see you, Jenny. And I'll post. You mentioned the Freedom Thinking website, and I'll post everything. And actually now Jenny's in the Facebook group, so you can, if you've got any other questions, I'm sure she'd be happy to answer under that thread where I introduced her. So thank you so much. What I'm going to do is, you lot are all going to go, and I'm just going to hang on and just say goodbye to Jenny myself. Tamsin's just said, thank you, what an awesome session. Marlena said, awesome webinar, thank you so much. Annie said, thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you. That's I'm so pleased you found it helpful, and the recording will go in the group. So we'll see you soon. Bye.
And I would say to people, if there's something that's interests you, please do look into it, because there's so many different speakers, and it might just be that you hear it different from a different speaker, and it doesn't need to be someone that's had the same thing as you or the same issue, or just listen. There's so much available, and so many incredible speakers and heartfelt teachers of this. If you just type in the 3 principles now on Google, you get a ton of stuff. So just be guided by what kind of makes sense for you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you later. Take care. Bye.